What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with another video, and I'm happy to provide to you my only full first-round mock draft for the upcoming 2023 NFL Draft, which is excitingly right around the corner. I will be live streaming throughout the first round on Thursday and throughout the second round on Friday. If you want to join me right here on YouTube, I'll be giving you my live reaction to whatever goes down. Anyways, I'm really looking forward to showing you guys what I think happens on Thursday night, because last year was the first time I did a ton of research and released a full first-round mock draft, and I did pretty damn good. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or what. And there's actually a website out there called the Huddle Report, which tracks all of the best mock drafters in the world. So a bunch of top analysts submit their finalized mock drafts to this website, and then at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you get your mock draft scored. Based on the Huddle Report scoring system, my first-round mock from last year would have scored 46 points, which would have tied third out of all the analysts, out of all the top guys that do submit to that website, and I thought that was pretty cool. Very easily could have gotten extremely lucky, and beginner's luck struck me hard, and that's why I'm excited to test it here with my second official mock draft. So let's get right into things here. In the interest of my cramped time schedule, I'm going to break this up into intervals of 5. I won't go into crazy detail on each selection unless I feel like it's necessary, but I will give a summary of each. Of course, starting with the top 5, and there is a ton of mystery around what is actually going to happen within the top 5 to 7 selections because of all the smoke that's been going out over the last month or so. Despite the fact that I do think CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in this class, and despite the fact that I do think he should be drafted first overall, it's become overwhelmingly obvious that it probably is going to be Bryce Young just based on everything we've been hearing. Maybe it's possible that the Texans fly into number 1 and they flip-flop with the Panthers to get Bryce Young because we know they were big on him, but I'm not going too crazy with the trades here, and I do have Bryce going first. The Texans at 2 are supposedly looking at defense if Bryce Young is off the board, and I am convinced that this is just a bunch of noise, because there's no way you can go into this draft class as the Houston Texans and not leave with one of these top 4 quarterbacks. You just can't take that risk. I think CJ Stroud is the second best guy on this board here, so I do have them going with Stroud. Next, for the third overall pick, this did belong to the Arizona Cardinals. I do believe they moved back out of this selection. It's been rumored heavily over the last few weeks now. It's just a matter of who the Cardinals are going to flip out with, and the majority opinion right now does believe that the Tennessee Titans will be moving up into this selection, but I just don't believe the Titans are ready to move in that direction. I don't know what it is, but something tells me that if the Titans move up to 3, then they'll also have to deal Derrick Henry, whether that's a part of the same trade or whatever. And I've been saying it all offseason, but I don't think the Titans are ready for that type of change just yet. I mean, they were atop of their division before all of the injuries struck them down. I do still think they're a team that could be a disruptor in the AFC. Not a contender, but definitely a team that will give other top teams some trouble. And I can see that front office letting things play out instead of trying to kickstart their future. So that leads me to pivot to the next team that I think is going to be interested here, and that is the Las Vegas Raiders. I know Jimmy G was signed for a decent amount of money, but it's just for 3 seasons, and we know Jimmy Garoppolo's role at this point in the NFL isn't to be anything more than just a bridge quarterback, let's be honest. The thing about Jimmy and the thing about the Raiders is that I don't think they're going to be bad enough within the next few years to really get another opportunity at a pick like this, and in this class, they do have a lot of draft capital to be able to make a move up into 3. But I think they'll be eager, they'll jump into 3, and they will go with Will Levis, simply because he's the project guy. He'll be able to learn behind Jimmy Garoppolo, maybe redshirt his rookie year. The Raiders are another team that I just cannot foresee leaving this class without a quarterback, and I know that's not the majority opinion, but it's just something in my heart telling me that that's the case. I guess we'll find out. That moves us to the 4th pick. We have the Colts obviously taking a quarterback. It's just a matter of who's going to end up falling in their lap. I think Anthony Richardson, obviously because of how the board fell, will be their guy. At number 5, that gives us the first non-quarterback to be taken off the board from the Seattle Seahawks, and I do think that's going to be Jalen Carter, despite the off-the-field stuff, despite the fact that Will Anderson's on the board. Based on what I read, Seattle has been intrigued by Jalen Carter, and that front office doesn't really care about the off-the-field stuff because they know they run a tight ship. They know they'll get him in line. With Seattle transitioning to a 3-4, it is imperative that they can get somebody on the interior that can hold their own, that is well-rounded, that is flat-out dominant. You've seen what type of damage that interior guys like Aaron Donald and Chris Jones could do, and I know it's insane to kind of make that comparison already, but Jalen Carter has that type of potential. One of the best interior prospects that we've seen in a very long time, and as great as Will Anderson is, guys like Jalen Carter don't come around too often, and for defensive schemes like Seattle, it is extremely important to have guys like Jalen, so I do think they go with Carter here. For the next interval of 5, that moves us to the 6th pick, to the Detroit Lions. That makes their selection extremely easy. They're going with Will Anderson. He's not falling past this pick. We'll happily pair him with Aiden Hutchinson. And at 7, the Cardinals Cardinals in their trade back will be going with Devin Witherspoon. Their secondary is getting depleted at this point. Buda Baker's requesting a trade. They need some help back there. Pretty confident he'll be the first cornerback off the board. But then at number 8, we have the Falcons. And now this could go in many different directions. Do the Falcons want to have fun? I'm kind of thinking they do. I think Atlanta wants to see what Desmond Ridder can do. And Arthur Smith and the way he runs that offense definitely relies on the ground game as we saw last year. You know, they got Tyler Algier. He had a humongous rookie season out of nowhere coming out of the 5th round. But that doesn't mean that Arthur Smith wouldn't love to have a two-headed monster like that. The Falcons are fine with the run game being the motor and their quarterback just having to do the bare minimum. And it's worked for other teams in the past. So I do have them going with Bijan Robinson, and they do also happen to be the top landing spot based on sportsbook odds. At 9, we have Chicago, who in a lot of cases probably would have been going with an offensive tackle here, but because of the way the board has drawn out for my mock draft, I have them going with Tyree Wilson. They need defensive playmakers. It really doesn't matter who it is, but getting a potential cornerstone pass rusher could definitely be a good start. So Tyree to the Bears. And at number 10, we have the Super Bowl runner-up Philadelphia Eagles. They're not really in a best player available type of mode, despite the fact that they did bring back a lot of guys. I think they'll address their biggest need here, and they'll go with Christian Gonzalez, the physical freak out of Oregon. Darius Slay's 32, CJ Gardner-Johnson left to the Lions. I think it makes a lot of sense here. Moving on to the next 5, at 11, we have the Tennessee Titans, who are supposed to trade up per a lot of people, but I have them sticking here, and I do think they have to go offensive line. They're going to go with an offensive tackle in Paris Johnson. Offensive line seems to be the move. It's just a matter of who. I have them going with Paris. At number 12, we have the Texans swooping back around, and if they don't make any type of trades, I have them going with JSN. I think it makes way too much sense to pair the two college teammates together, and they really start to build that offense out. And at 13, we have the Packers, who recently moved up a couple places after dealing Rodgers to the Jets. Based on what I was reading from Packers beat reporters, they do believe that because of the transition from 15 to 13, they could be interested in the offensive tackle market because they feel like they want to get ahead of the potential run that'll happen in the middle picks. And at 13, I think the Packers get a steal in Peter Skoronski. He's the most versatile offensive lineman in the class, deemed to be the best by a lot of people. Next at 14, we have the good old New England Patriots, and trying to determine what Billy Boy is going to do on draft day is about as difficult as it gets. I might as well throw every player that's draft eligible into a wheel, and whatever the wheel lands on is who they're going to draft. But in my mock, I do have them going with edge rusher Nolan Smith. Also heard rumblings that potentially New England is interested in Zay Flowers, and although that would be great for New England and it would make a ton of sense, Bill typically doesn't do what is the most sensible thing. He's probably thinking Juju is good enough to add this offseason and Mac will figure it out by himself. Patriots are definitely the most mysterious pick in the entire first round, and I'm very interested to see what they actually do, but in my mock, I have them going with Nolan Smith. Next at 15, we have the Jets. They trade a first round pick and some change for a 40-year-old quarterback. You better be protecting him, so they're definitely going to be drafting an offensive lineman. In my opinion, they're going to be going with Broderick Jones. Moving on to the next interval of 5, at number 16, we have the Commanders, who I think continue the run on offensive tackles, and they go with Darnell Wright. Moving on to 17, we have Pittsburgh, and I do think defensive back is the obvious choice. But depending on how the board falls, I think it is possible that they address the first or second level on the defensive side of the ball. I think it's also maybe possible that they look at a receiver again. But in this mock, I keep it simple. I address the secondary because they really don't have much outside of Pat Pete. They go with Joey Porter Jr. His father played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It seems to be a perfect match for that defense. Moving on to 18, we have the Lions, and based on my mock so far, I think they had two different choices, either tight end or defensive back. This was a really tough decision, but I had them going in the secondary, even though they just brought in Cam Sutton, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Emmanuel Mosley. Most of their additions are not long-term options, and they did trade away Jeff Okudah, so I have them attacking this area of their football team, bringing in Brian Branch, the versatile defensive back. I did see Branch getting mocked to go later in the first for the most part, but because he's the only safety that you could consider taking in the first, I think he goes a little bit higher because he's kind of at a premium, and Detroit takes advantage here. Now at number 19, I have the Bucs, and when I tell you I spend an absurd amount of time thinking about what the Bucs could do here, I truly mean that. And that would be because I do think they are a silent potential trade down target or trade up target for teams in the back end of the first round. Because of them being possibly linked to Hendon Hooker, I think they could get away with moving back to the end of the first because I do think that's where Hendon could be taken at the earliest. So I was theorizing and I thought to myself, what if the Chiefs move up from 31 to 19 and they end up swooping in and taking Zay Flowers here, or maybe Quentin Johnston, just one of the top receivers. But I didn't have the balls to make that type of thing happen. I didn't want to get too crazy, so I took the traditional route. I have them going with the boring offensive tackle. I know, boo-hoo. And I have them going with Anton Harrison. This might be considered a reach in the eyes of some, but there's an offensive tackle run happening in the middling rounds. And I think because of that run, teams like the Bucs, who could be in the market for a tackle, will just be happy to reach a little bit. Next at number 20, we have the Seahawks, their second pick of the first round. And similar to the Buccaneers pick, I was racking my brain. I was racking my brain for a lot of these early picks in the 20s here. I saw a lot of people saying that receiver is a real possibility due to the fact that Tyler Lockett is getting a little bit older. They want to spread things out in 11 personnel on offense. I also do firmly believe, just based on how Seattle has drafted in the past, that they're really going to try and figure out this defensive line in this class, similar to what they did with their offensive line last year, both their tackles. Based on how my mock is gone, the Seahawks have an opportunity to walk away with not just Jalen Carter, but a guy like Myles Murphy at 20 to really round out their defensive front. The second to last interval at 21, we have the Chargers. Another pick, like I mentioned, that really drove me nuts because I just am not sure what they're actually going to do. I really think tight end is a strong possibility here, but I also think wide receiver is as well. And honestly, so is somebody in the secondary, and so is somebody in the defensive front. This team could really go in any direction they want. I went through the mock a few times, and I had them going with tight end Michael Mayer time and time again, but something just told me in the back of my mind that Kellen Moore is going to want to really open this offense up. He's going to want to get receiver help for Justin Herbert. Keenan Allen's getting up there in age. They need speed. Michael Mayer doesn't really provide that to them, so I have them going with Jordan Addison out of USC. This is one of those selections I'm not the most confident in, but if they do go with the receiver, I do think it'll be Addison over Zay Flowers, even though I do think I have Zay over Addison in my personal opinion. Then at 22, we have the Baltimore Ravens, who I think could be a prime candidate to trade back here. As I mentioned, didn't want to get too crazy. I do think Baltimore ends up going with receiver. I think they're in, hey, Lamar, we'll do whatever you want kind of mode, and that will be getting weapons on weapons on weapons. I think Rashad Bateman could be that vertical threat for them, but they need somebody to help out underneath to really help Mark Andrews get open instead of drawing all the attention, and I do think a guy like Zay Flowers would help out tremendously for Lamar Jackson, just how quick the change of direction. Zay would be a humongous help to this offense. I think because of the offensive coordinator change, they will be heading in an air raid type of direction, and Zay Flowers will be able to help that effort, and I think it'll make Lamar Jackson happy. So that's the selection here. Next at 23, we have the last team that could potentially take Hendon Hooker, and they're actually the leading favorite to land him, ironically enough. This being the Vikings, I don't think they take Hooker at 23, and I was between a wide receiver and a defensive back. Those are really the top two options for them. To stick in the secondary here, I think Deonte Banks, who was heavily mocked to land with Minnesota, makes a ton of sense. The loss of Pat Peterson and a bunch of question marks in that secondary, I mean, they can use any help that they can get. Next at 24, we have the Jacksonville Jaguars, and a ton of people believe that Brian Branch will be falling here, and that will be the Jaguars selection, but I don't think Brian's going to make it. We'll have to pivot. I think they go to the defensive line, and who better than Lucas Van Ness to take here? I think his skid has gone on a little bit too long in my mock for my personal liking, so he's got to go eventually, and the fit makes sense. Next at 25, we have the Giants. This was another pick that really had me scratching my head because receiver seems like the obvious choice, but I was seeing defensive back mocked here a ton. Let's hypothetically say that they don't end up going with a receiver here, or the top four guys are off the board, then I do think cornerback Emmanuel Forbes will be their pick. Quentin Johnston's here, and they just re-signed Daniel Jones, and it appears that they're going to try and make things work with him as much as they possibly can, and what better way to do that than to really load him up with weapons on the offensive side of the ball. I know they brought in Darren Waller, but that's not going to be enough. He's 30. He's constantly injured. They brought in Paris Campbell. He doesn't have the best injury history either. Darius Slayton's all right. Sterling Shepard's always hurt. They need some help. Could certainly use some size on the boundary. Quentin's got that, and I think the pick here makes a ton of sense for New York. And now for our final batch, 26 through 31. At 26, we have the Dallas Cowboys. It seems pretty convincing that they will be going with a tight end. It's just a matter of Dalton Kincaid or Michael Mayer, and if the offensive coordinator was still Kellen Moore, I do think it would be Dalton Kincaid. But Kellen Moore is gone, and now Cowboys fans get the luxury of watching Mike McCarthy be their offensive play caller. At least I believe that's what the plan is based on the report I last read. If that is the case, Mike McCarthy himself came out and said, I want my defense to get a damn break, which means he wants to run the ball, which means that Michael Mayer, who is providing that run blocking and that blocking overall support, will be the selection while also providing some receiver upside. Great for Cowboys fans. I don't know what Mike McCarthy's going to do to that offense, but something tells me they are probably not going to be returning to that top 5 highly efficient form that we're used to them being at. We on to 27, my Buffalo Bills. If you watched my Buffalo Bills mock draft video, you would have known what pick was coming here. And I know a lot of people might not like it. It's not exciting, but I do have them going with defensive line, and it is going to be Kalijah Kancey out of Pitt. That position on the football team, whether we like it or not, needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed ASAP, and I do think this is a very Brandon Bean type of pick. And at 28, we have the Bengals. This pick really challenged my brain as well. A lot of people do think the secondary will be their choice to attack, and that makes a ton of sense. Considering Emmanuel Emmanuel Forbes is still on the board in my mock. That's probably the more responsible thing to do. But we also know how Cincinnati operates. They're all about offense. They're all about scoring points. And they also really like their tight end. A couple years ago, we saw CJ Uzomah constantly involved. Last year was Hayden Hurst. Did remediate the spot by bringing in Irv Smith, but I'm not sure they're going to be satisfied with that. And if a guy like Dalton Kincaid is sitting there at 28, I feel like they'll have a really hard time not pulling the trigger on him. Kincaid is basically another receiver, and I think Cincinnati would salivate at the idea of getting Burrow another weapon to pair alongside T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. So that's the pick here. Next to 29, we have the Saints. I think they keep it relatively boring. It was between two guys for me at this spot. It's either between Brian Brzee as well as Will McDonald. I have them going with Brian because I do think they need the interior help a little bit more. And at 30, we have the Eagles, who I think have some fun because they've been heavily linked and rumored to be talking to Bijan Robinson, and it seems like Bijan Robinson is interested in Philadelphia. Obviously, he did not fall to the Eagles at 10, so what do? Well, they go ahead and they get Jahmyr Gibbs instead, who is supposedly rising up draft boards drastically. Considering they brought in Rashad Penny on a one-year deal, as much as I do like that, there's no way they're only going to ride with just Rashad. So they're going to go ahead, add more firepower to the offensive side of the ball while they kind of have a Super Bowl window available to them, and Jahmyr Gibbs is the pick. We will finish things off by having the Kansas City Chiefs select Will McDonald, the edge rusher, at 31. We really wanted to have some fun here, but I do think a lot of what we're seeing with the Chiefs and Zay Flowers and the other top receivers is kind of just a bunch of smoke. But at the same time, I almost kind of feel like it isn't, and I'm kind of regretting not having them trade up. But that is my mock draft, ladies and gentlemen. Will McDonald does finish it off. I'll put the full thing right next to my head here on screen. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. I am ecstatic to see how this ages. Any thoughts, any opinions, anything you might have to say, drop them down in the comments. It's a super exciting time for the offseason. Make sure you're joining me while I live stream throughout the first and second round, Thursday night and Friday night, right here on YouTube, as well as Facebook and Twitter. So check it out. It's going to be a fun time. I'll be posting a bunch of information on my social media pages about when I'll exactly be going live, so be sure to look out for that. As always, guys, if you did enjoy, please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. If you want to hit the bell to be notified when I upload, I appreciate that. You want to go over to Twitter, follow me over there, I'd appreciate that as well. I have a TikTok down in my description that I think you should check out, and I hope to see you in the next one.
Talking about him, and you talking about him. But you know what you're not talking about? Hell!